night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Welcome to the show. After last night's debacle, I still haven't heard anything from those guys. I don't know what's up. The guy ran for president, and this is whatever. I'm not even going to go into it. But tonight we've got a great show. I'm really excited about this one. It was actually in the works for a while. Lauren Cahn is a writer. She's a culture writer. She writes for a lot of places, including Reader's Digest, Health Digest, and others. And I came across an article, and I don't remember exactly when it was. It may have been early December, maybe late November. I don't remember, but it was can dogs see ghosts was the gist of the article, and I read it, and it was really quite interesting. It was a light article, and she featured a few psychic mediums in the discussion and animal experts, veterinarians, and I got to thinking about this particular topic because I think we've all, at least all of us who have had pets, have had those moments where we see our dog or our cat, generally not our fish, but the dog or the cat anyway, kind of staring off into the corner of a room. And in some cases, if it's a dog, maybe growling a little bit or even barking, or their eyes are following something through the room that you can't see. That makes it's very curious. A lot of times when we do in paranormal investigations, we will find that those phenomena are often caused by something in the walls. The dogs and cats have a far greater sense of smell. We all know that. They can sense these things, generally have a better sense of hearing. And although we can't see, hear, or smell a mouse maybe running through the wall, they can. So I would say a good number of those instances are caused by something that we can explain that way. However, there are times where that's not the case. So tonight we're going to be talking with Lauren about this article that she wrote. Plus, we're going to have Kristy Robinett on. Kristy is one of the psychic mediums that was featured in the article. And Kristy has written a book about this very topic. It's called Tales from the Afterlife. Tales being Tails, which I think is a really clever title, by the way. Tales from the Afterlife. And we're going to talk about animals and the paranormal, the crossover, not just in the sense that can your dog or cat actually see a ghost that you might not be able to see, but let's talk about animals on the other side as well. And we're going to get into all of this tonight. Plus, we're going to talk to Lauren about some of her other work. She's written about Ouija boards. She's written about crimes that have been solved and mysteries that have been solved by psychics. So we'll touch on those topics as well. But we have a lot to cover with these two terrific guests, and I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I have been for quite a while. Be sure that to subscribe to our channels. I always kind of stumble into this because I forget that I want to say it, and then I remember last second. But go to YouTube, subscribe to the JV Johnson channel. It's easy to find. Go to Twitch, subscribe to our channel there. Both of our channels serve a different purpose. The Twitch channel is although we do stream the weekday show there, it's primarily for our weekend stuff. And our YouTube channel is primarily, well, it's got two purposes. It's our main stream for the weekday program. However, it also serves as our archive, our video interview archive, where we keep our show. If you don't subscribe to the podcast version, you have an archive available to you in the YouTube channel as well. There's 700 programs there, something crazy. A lot of shows there. As always, our chat room is very active and very busy. Thank you to all of you in our chat room for being here. I appreciate it. It helps me smile, and a lot of great insight there, too. I love when I say something that I know I don't have an answer to, I can look to the chat room and somebody gives me the answer, which sometimes makes me look very, very smart when I know, in fact, it's not me. But I'll take the credit for it if you don't mind. Anyway, all right, let's go to break. We'll get our guests with us, and we'll begin having this conversation about the paranormal and animals, particularly our pets. It's beyond reality, and we'll be right back. Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johaw. That's JOHAW. How many times have you been in the living room, right? Your dog is lying on the bed next to you, behaving wonderfully. You're watching, I don't know, reruns of Seinfeld or something, and all of a sudden the dog looks up into the corner and maybe growls a little bit, right? That makes you wonder what's going on. Is the dog responding to something physical, or maybe it's something spiritual? We're going to have that conversation tonight. We've got two terrific guests. Lauren Cahn is a culture writer. She writes for Reader's Digest, Health Digest, and other publications and online periodicals. We also have Kristy Robinett. Kristy is a psychic, a medium, and an author of several books, including Tales from the Afterlife, Tales being spelled Tails. Very clever title. Welcome, Kristy and Lauren. Great to have you both on the program with us tonight.
Hi, thank you. Great to be here. This is Lauren.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm excited about this conversation because this is one of those things that everybody who is a pet owner particularly has experienced at one point or the other. Behavior in an animal, in a dog or a cat primarily, that you can't quite explain, and you just kind of wonder to yourself, are they seeing something that we just can't pick up? But before we get into that specifically, Lauren, I want to talk a little bit about your work, just so people know who you are. You write about a lot of different topics, a lot of different things, in a lot of different places. Give us a kind of a synopsis of your work.
Well, that's pretty much you hit the nail on the head. I write about basically anything that interests me or that my editors tell me might interest other people. So I was a lawyer for a number of years, so I can write about anything legal and business related. But my favorite thing to write about is culture. Things like this. I write a lot about dogs. I write about history and historical mysteries, the royal family. It just, you name it, I've written about it.
And the paranormal, in looking through a lot of your articles, I see these paranormal themes popping up now and then. We're going to be specifically talking about this article that you wrote about dogs and ghosts. However, you've written about Ouija boards, you've written about psychics. Is there some confluence in your life that brings your attention to these paranormal topics?
I have always been interested in the paranormal. I've been watching The Twilight Zone since I was a little kid.
Nice.
I've had my own Ouija board since as long as I can remember. When I was in college, my friends and I learned how to read tarot cards. It's just kind of been part of me, so I've gravitated towards it.
Interesting. Kristy, I want to find out a little bit about you as well. You're a psychic medium. You're also an author. You've written a lot about these topics. When did you first start recognizing your sensitivities?
Oh, gosh. I was about 3 years old when I had spirits that were coming to me telling me information. And I think I have a similar story that a lot of mediums tell, with the childhood encounters. But I was raised in a very religious household that anything to do with Ouija boards or tarot cards or ghosts or anything paranormal was considered satanic. So, what a great complex to have, at 3 years old growing up and giving predictions to my parents, including one that my grandmother was going to pass away. And suddenly my grandmother passed away.
Oh, wow.
And they looked at me a little bit more serious and a little bit more stranger. And at 4, they marched me up to the local Lutheran school and said, let's get her some religion and get her busy and get her a little bit more straight-lined. I always say that they tried to get the demons out of me, jokingly. And it's never gone away. I turned 50 in 2020, and I haven't been able to get those so-called demons out of me.
What is it about families, that I guess we'll call them religious families, that seem to have this fear of this particular phenomenon? I grew up in a Catholic family, and I encountered the same thing. My grandmother, you mentioned ghosts or any of these things, and she just would hear nothing of it. What is it about religion and the paranormal that is in such conflict in many cases?
I think it's fear. I think it's exactly that the unknown, when you can't explain something, that it's spooky, it's scary to not have that black and white connected to it. And I don't know if Lauren's got another sort of insight with it as being a writer and a journalist, but for me, I think that it's just pure fear. And then they didn't know how to help me, so there was no mentor. And I was born in the 70s, and there was such a stigma with anything to do with mediums or psychics. It was really kind of like an SNL, ha-ha type of a thing with the crystal ball and the Stevie Nicks flowing down, So I don't think that they wanted their daughter to grow up to be that.
Yeah, I don't know much about your family, obviously, but did they ever come to terms with it?
They didn't. My father actually lives with us, my husband and I, and every once in a while he still is like screeching his evangelical, stuff as if to still try to get to me. I did before my mom passed away. I did get to sit down with her. I was working at that time on a really horrible police case that was unsolved, and she was very concerned about me working on this case because the criminal was still out there, and he was kind of chasing me. It's kind of a book that I could put out there, and I haven't myself. And I was able to sit next to her, and she knew she was dying, but she said, "Kristy, if you know things, can you tell me if I'm going to die?" And what a horrible thing to put on me.
Yeah.
And of course I said, "No, Mom, you're going to do great," knowing that she wasn't, but I wanted her to fight anyway. So I think she was mad at me for a while when she crossed over.
Wow. Well, that is a heck of a burden on your shoulders, and just a horrible position to be in. Lauren, you're right about so many topics. This one obviously caught my eye for a lot of reasons. We talk about these things on this program often. How did it catch your eye? How did ghosts and dogs catch your eye?
Well, I had a very special pet, Louis the Beagle, from 2004 until December 2019 when he passed away, and it hit me really hard. It hit my whole family really hard, especially my younger son. And I just started giving a lot of thought to the paranormal in relation to dogs. I had never really thought about it until I lost Louis the Beagle. And then a few months later, I ended up adopting Lucy the foxhound. And I feel like with her, I'm very conscious of her connection to the spirit world. I'm always, like what you described in the beginning about, your dog suddenly growls at something, I'm very conscious of that with her. So I've been very fascinated with it, and, it leads to me writing about it.
First question is, do you include the breed in the name of your dogs? Like you say, Louis the Beagle. Is that part of your naming nomenclature?
Well, because I like to give my dogs human names. So I feel like if I say Louis, they might think I'm talking about like my uncle or something, or Lucy.
Sense.
I don't know what they're going to think. So I say Lucy the Foxhound or Louis the Beagle. And they've always been. And Louis actually had his own blog on Huffington Post.
Oh wow! Oh, very accomplished.
He was a famous beagle.
What about your experiences with the paranormal? Have you had anything happen to you, whether it was as a child or an adult, that you would point to being at least maybe curiously paranormal?
I feel embarrassed saying this like in front of Kristy because she's the real thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just me. But I feel like I can sense things that are happening. Or I don't, how do I explain this? Someone that I cared about passed away recently, very recently, in early December. And I didn't know he was sick. He kept it from people. And for the last month or so, I was feeling sick and I was not well, and something was really eating at me. And then I found out that he passed away the night of my birthday. It just seems it's things like that where I just wonder, like, is there something that I know deep down? Is there an intuition?
Well, first of all, sorry for your loss. That's obviously no time of year is a good time of year to have a loss like that, but particularly around a birthday and around Christmas time, that's really sad. I'm sorry to hear that. But Kristy, that brings up an important point as well, because in your work, you recognize that there are people like yourself that are very, very sensitive and very in tune with this. And then there are people like me, who I'm like as sensitive as a brick. And then there's people like Lauren who kind of think, you know what, maybe I'm connected to something here. I don't really understand what's happening, but something's happening.
Yeah, I love that everyone has their own gift and their own ability to tune in or not tune in. I often call it a muscle. that you can work on or not work on, and I think that some people are a little bit more naturally born with it, just as if they're naturally born with a musical gift or they're naturally born with a sportsmanship gift. And I think that there is a special sort of breed of people who are more empaths. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're psychic, but that's what Lauren talks about, is that knowing or that feeling or taking on physical ailments or taking on emotional ailments of somebody. And that is probably one of the toughest gifts. A lot of people consider it a curse because sometimes you don't have an explanation until after it's already been validated. And it makes you feel like you're crazy, especially if you're more of a black and white type of a person that wants that validation in the moment, and there is no validation. And I think that, like, for you, even though you might not necessarily, not that you're not open, because obviously you do the show, but that you might be a little bit maybe more skeptical, because those that are skeptical, have seen a lot of frauds, in the business. And there's frauds in every business, but there's an awful lot of slimy people, that cross boundaries because of the desperate side of this work. So I think sometimes we put those barriers up as well. And so I love that the world has all of these different individuals. That's what makes the world go around. And I love the skeptics, and I love the ones that I work with. Law enforcement, law enforcement, they are definitely not opening me with open arms most all of the time. They are the ones that are like, prove it to me. Right. So I think that that's great, because there is a lot of crappy people in this or take this on.
Yeah, and Kristy, you say it's like a muscle, and the more you use it, the better you get at it. But you kind of were just like hit by it like a truck, 3 years old, and you had communications coming from the other side. That's not easing into it.
No, and I tried to wish it away. I mean, I went to parochial school. I married a skeptic like my father. I knew he was cheating on me. I divorced the skeptic like my father.
Oh, boy.
And had 2 beautiful kids with him, so I have absolutely no regrets with that. But it really honestly wasn't until I met my now husband, who, it was a blind date, and he's like, what do you do for a living? And I was working a regular type of a job. Like, I do have a college education, and I didn't, embrace this, right away. And instead of telling him what my corporate title was, I said spirit medium. And it was like somebody from the other side must have hit me in the back of the head, and I spit it out. I don't even know how I said it. And he looked at me and goes, cool, can you pass the ketchup? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, someone isn't, say, give me a reading or prove it to me or something like that. So when I surrounded myself with people who didn't second guess me or who believed in me, is when I really kind of flourished, and I was able to feel comfortable in my own skin. And I think that goes with anything in our life. Like I said, if you want to play the piano and everyone's like, oh, you shouldn't play the piano, you're going to suck at the piano. And then someone says, hey, that's cool that you play the piano. You do better at playing the piano.
Talk about a bit of an uncomfortable situation to be a guy going on a blind date with a psychic. You can't keep any secrets, and you've got no mysteries going in there. That's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, relationships sucked for me, honestly. Like, that's a sitcom right there. The first dates with Kristy. That was pretty brutal, for sure.
Do you want to hear something really weird about that? Like a coincidence? Yeah. I have to tell you. The friend of mine who passed away, one of the first anecdotes he ever told me was how he went on a date with a woman who told him she was a psychic.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, isn't that weird?
Wow.
That must be a heaven hello, though, for you, Lauren, because I don't normally share that story.
Oh, so my God. All right.
That's pretty interesting.
That.
All right, I've got to ask you, Kristy, you just used a phrase that I'd never heard before, a heaven hello. Tell me about this.
Yeah, I think every day in our life, I think that we're getting these kind of heaven winks from the other side, and it might be a song on the radio that we haven't heard in forever, but makes us conjure a memory of someone that we love that's crossed over, or, a cardinal that we used to always tell our mom, oh, if you go, if you pass away, always send me a cardinal, and you haven't seen a cardinal in forever. So I think that we're always gifted these heaven hellos, and we don't always pay attention. I mean, we're so hooked to our electronics right now that if we're distracted, from everything, it's hard to pay attention to that for sure. So sometimes people will mention their name, and it's someone that, again, reminds you of somebody that had passed away that you love. Or it's not coincidences. I don't believe in coincidences, especially if it happens more than once.
Lauren, did Louis the Beagle ever look up into a corner and stare, or maybe just keep looking back, giving you the impression that something's there that you can't see?
No, but Lucy the foxhound does that. Louis the Beagle was not, I don't feel he was that spiritually, while he was on this earth, I don't think he was that spiritually in touch. I feel like he's here with me now. But Lucy the foxhound is extremely spiritual, and I think she's connecting with things that I have no idea what she's connecting with. And then she looks at me with these eyes, and I'm like, what are you trying to tell me? You want to tell me something, but she won't tell me.
When you set out to write this particular, first of all, how many articles do you write a week? Is it 1 a week, 10 a week? How much work do you do?
Let me think. Well, like on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I usually write about 5 altogether.
Oh, wow.
I write news articles on Wednesdays and Thursdays, but the rest of the week I write about 1 a day, and I usually take about 1, maybe a day off a week.
Wow.
I'm trying to cut back. I'm a workaholic.
Yeah,
I'm trying to cut back.
What little I know, and I used to be the publisher of a magazine, a paranormal magazine, and I know how difficult it is. The writing is one thing. It's coming up with the ideas to write about that was the challenge for me. Same for you?
No, I'm like a pitch prodigy. I'll come up with like 20 pitches a day and send them to my editor. And sometimes I think, I'm so weird. Like, that's so weird of me. Like, that I have so many ideas to write about, and they don't all get picked, obviously. But yeah, no, I'm creative, so I'm always coming up with ideas.
When you decided to write about dogs and ghosts and the paranormal, did you go into it with any preconceived ideas or notions? What were your beliefs, maybe, about ghosts when you sat down to write this article?
What I was thinking, I was really looking at it more as a writer and how I was going to get the story across without making myself sound like I lacked credibility. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to. Kristy told me this amazing story, which I mentioned in the story, about a dog who played with the spirit of his owner after his death. I wanted to be able to tell that story without people thinking, oh, who are these people? Like, who's this Lauren Cahn and who's this Kristy? Like, what? But they're crazy. Why are they telling me this? So it was not really my own cynicism. It was my fear of other people's cynicism.
So you had a fear that people, because, again, you write about a lot of different things, and you're not writing for paranormal journals, you're writing for mainstream journals. So you were afraid that you're going to present this information and people are going to say, uh-oh, Lauren has kind of lost it here.
Exactly. I mean, when I write about conspiracy theories, I'm always a little bit concerned that people are going to think that I believe all the conspiracy theories.
Right.
I only believe like 75% of them. Yeah, I think.
But what were your thoughts about ghosts? I mean, you talked about feeling like you have this, psychic connection at times, or these premonitions, or whatever you want to call them. But what about ghosts?
I want to believe in ghosts, so I'm already predisposed to wanting to believe that there's something out there and that there's something to connect us, and that when you're gone, you're not really gone.
Yeah.
But I just want people to, I want people like Kristy to prove it to me. Mm-hmm. I don't want to disprove them. I want them to prove it to me. I want them to show me convincing evidence. So I got really excited when I was writing about the psychic, crimes solved by psychics, because it was very obvious to me as I was listening to those stories that the police didn't want to believe it either.
Right.
And they had to. And it seems to me, and I don't know if this is true, Kristy, you can tell me if it's not, it seems like law enforcement generally want to keep the word psychic out of it, so they may rely on psychics, but they don't always say that they do.
Yeah, I'm typically just called a consultant. There is nothing new agey that is mentioned. I was working one really, really kind of a tough case with a child that was taken from her home, and it was horrible. And he had me undercover interviewing the people that he thought were responsible. And I look at him, and shake my head, they're not. These are not our people. And they would get mad because they want to solve the crime, and this is who their hunches are, right? The evidence is posing that this is who they should be going after, and they've got this, person who is, not in the world of criminal justice, but still gives so much credit, to our law enforcement officers. And I'm shaking my head going, you are on the wrong path. And sometimes it's not black and white. This particular case was really strange because this little girl came to me in spirit and said, it's the one that has the white cat. So, how are the police supposed to go door to door, and search for a white cat, right? Like, that's not really evidence.
Kristy,
it wasn't.
Did you say cat or cap?
Yeah, cat. C-A-T.
Okay.
Cat. So she kept saying,
yeah?
and we think that that's maybe how they got her out of the house, is they said, I'm looking for my cat, or, come look at this cat. And so she kept saying, it's the white cat. And they're angry with me. The police are like, we can't search every house and search for a white cat. Well, it ended up, this person, the person that ended up murdering this young girl, went to prison, and he finally confessed. And they went to the house of where his wife was, and what greeted them at the front door? A white cat.
Oh,
wow.
And they were, they called me up. And again, sometimes you get the validation and sometimes you don't. But they're like, well, how in the world, would we ever know that? So, but I'm like, I'm talking to a 4-year-old little girl, and that's what her focus is on, is the cat, not her death or brutal murder, but the cat. And so I always want to prove, things in a black and white type of a way. I was working one police case, and they wanted that black and white. We want you to give us evidence, and we want to see the evidence. And I can't snap my fingers and, here's the spirit, like a hologram, out of Star Trek or something. Like, that would be really cool if I had that gift. And unfortunately, that's not realistic. So I thought, what am I going to do that I can give them black and white, like, evidence? And I went, I'm not a fan of Ouija boards, but I'm going to get a Ouija board. And I'll see if I can conjure her spirit to help me with this Ouija board, right? So I buy these Ouija boards. They're like $30. They're expensive. And I won't bore you with, I'm not a fan of Ouija boards, so I don't really want it in my house anyway. Had problems when I was a kid. But my husband and I bought this Ouija board, and we go in this conference room. We have all these law enforcement, and I protect myself, and I protect the Ouija board, and I protected it so much that it didn't work. But I got all of this information that helped them, but they still were really pissed that, like, the planchette wasn't, moving, and, nothing was happening. And I thought, well, I wanted my $30 back, right? So I go back, I take it to the customer service desk the next day, and they're like, what's wrong with it? I'm like, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
I imagine that spirits and ghosts don't respond to subpoenas either. You probably can't use the legal system in your favor there. I want to get back to this conversation about the investigations and helping criminals or helping police with criminal solving crimes, because I know Lauren has written about that. But let's go back to this pet idea. Kristy, you have written extensively about animals and the afterlife and the paranormal. And we're talking about a couple of different things here. We're talking about, one, live pets or animals being able to sense the paranormal or ghosts or spirit activity, but we're also talking about animals being able to cross over and being on the other side, just as a human would, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, born into a religious household and being told in school and home and church that, animals don't have souls, therefore they do not cross over to the other side. And it angered me so much because I will put this out there in the beginning. In fact, I think I told Lauren this, when she pitched me, do you have any information about this? I'm like, I am not a pet psychic. I am not Dr. Doolittle. I don't talk to them in that way. There's great animal communicators. I see them and I sense them and I get information from human guides, but I don't talk to them like some animal communicators do. So when I wrote even my book, when my publisher was like, can you write this book? I kept going, I feel like a fraud myself because I don't know how many times I wrote in the book, I am not a pet psychic. I sense these animals. And, but I thought, heaven is all the things that we love. Why wouldn't we be gifted our pets on the other side when we cross over? And why wouldn't they, that they gave us so much love, be given the opportunity to go to the other side and be able to protect us and love us from the other side? And that's exactly what I see. Picking up on that idea there, are the pets and their souls there on the other side because we will them to be, or are they there on their own volition? I think a little bit of both. I don't think that, if you hate spiders, you're not going to necessarily create your heaven with a bunch of spiders. Thank goodness. Right. Thank goodness. No spiders for me. But if you love spiders, then you've got spiders in your heaven. Or if you took care of a pet tarantula, then your pet tarantula is going to be there. But I think it's a little bit of they're gifted that opportunity to continue to have that afterlife to make you happy, and because they did make you happy.
Lauren, in the article, when you were writing about this and you were researching this, what characteristics did you determine would be indicative of an animal, whether it's a dog or a cat, but primarily a dog, because that's what the article's about, noticing some kind of paranormal activity? What signs would somebody be looking for to see if their dog is actually sensing this stuff?
That's okay. So I went at it from a slightly different perspective, which was that all dogs are. It's like the opposite of what Kristy said too. I always thought that all dogs had some capacity for seeing the paranormal, for perceiving the paranormal. I don't know if it's seeing. And I actually also thought that if there's a spirit world, dogs are definitely part of it. But I think what people notice, what makes them suspect that their dogs are interacting with the paranormal world somehow, is that their dogs will react to something that you can't see.
Right.
I've seen Lucy the foxhound play bowing with nobody there. And I've wondered, is she playing with somebody who I can't see? It's stuff like that.
And I would assume, Kristy, that you probably have either, if not seen personally, similar behavior in an animal, but certainly heard stories, or because you've talked about this.
Well, I think that even our pets grieve, if they lose their companion, their furry companion. If you've got two dogs and one passes on, I think that they definitely see that. Or you add one to the household, like Lauren talked about. I believe that they're almost, they're given the look over, to make sure that they fit the family just well, and they're given the thumbs up, the paws up, that it's okay, for them to also be part of the family. So I believe that they do have that capability of seeing. They're not told that there's no such thing as ghosts.
Right.
Dogs, if you were to tell them that, they would be like, what are you talking about? So they live in that alpha state of being without worries, like we are consumed with as humans. So they're just like kids who have that capability of seeing beyond the veil. And so, yeah, they play with, they see, they sense, they growl, they get protective. They do all those things that is what their job is for us humans to be. And in the article that Lauren wrote, I told a story about and I don't know, this always makes me cry because it's a true story, is a widow who they had a loving dog. This dog was like her and her husband's child. Like, this dog got treated like a king, and the dog's name was Elmer. And Elmer started sleeping on the late husband's side of the bed soon after he passed away. Like, he was like, I will take over as, you know, your human, if you will. I will take care of you. And as time went on, Elmer took to running to the front door in the evenings exactly at the time that his dad, you know, her widow, would have come home and would greet this unseen visitor at the exact same time, and never did it in, you know, for anybody else, you know, at any other time. And it was so much proof to this widow that it was definitely, you know, that routine that she needed to see out of, and Elmer needed that as well. So I think, you know, we've had the encounters. A lot of people have felt their animals jump up on the bed, you know, or rub against them, or they'll hear their ball, you know, move, or the jingle of the collar, and there isn't another, you know, animal in the house that's doing that. That's making that. Again, I like to debunk a little bit too. So,
Lauren, when you hear a story like that, as somebody who's obviously cared deeply for a pet dog, how does that make you feel?
Well, as I was listening to what Kristy was saying, I was just thinking, dogs are really the perfect spiritual vehicle. Even if you're a cynic, you can't deny that dogs have some degree of extrasensory perception.
Yeah.
They see and hear things that we can't see and hear. They smell things we can't possibly smell. I mean, even at just the very concrete level of senses, they're more powerful than us. They know more than us. They can read your feelings. They have much more empathy as a rule than humans do. They read things instinctively. They don't have to process it with thought. So it just makes me think, you know, but the more we talk, the more I'm realizing, of course, it makes sense that that dogs can see ghosts. Of course. We
have a very active chat room, and a couple of questions have flown through there that I want to ask before I forget them. One of them I thought was quite insightful. We were talking about souls and crossing over, and we were talking about humans and animals both doing this. The question was, is a human soul different from an animal soul, or can that soul be an animal in one life and a human in a different life? Any thoughts? Let's start with you, Kristy. Any thoughts on that? And Lauren, if you want to chime in, please do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of us say, you know, I want to come back as a cat, you know, or a dog, because it's such an amazing life where a lot of them are treated better than. I mean, my kids have accused me of giving my pets better Christmas gifts than I've given to them. So, you know, possibly. I believe in past lives, and I believe in the ability to come back into this life. I will never say never. I don't have all the answers. I think that our pets can come back as a new pet. I don't necessarily think that our dog that we lost is going to come back as our grandson, but I'm also not going to say for real, set in stone, that cannot happen or that will not happen.
What do you think, Lauren? I mean,
I'm with Kristy on that.
Yeah.
Although I would put me a little bit less cynical in this case than Kristy. For some reason, I've always believed that souls don't know, you know, whether they're humans or dogs or whatever. That I don't know how it's determined where a soul goes, but Yeah, I mean, when my children were born, I felt like I knew them in another life, and maybe that's just because I'm a mom. Maybe that's what all moms think. But Louis the Beagle, yeah, I felt like he reached a very high level of heaven just in living his life with us, because he started out, he was a stray, and we rescued him.
Oh.
And he lived in New York City, and he was okay in New York City. He liked it. He was happy to have a family. But then we moved to the country. We moved to upstate New York, and he was just the happiest dog ever. Like, if you think about how fortunate he was, I feel like he must have done something really good in a past life to have earned such a good life.
Lauren, I've got to ask you, how far upstate New York did you move?
Not very. I was in Westchester County.
Okay,
I only call it upstate because I feel like everybody else calls it.
I'm in Cooperstown, New York, so I'm really upstate.
Oh, you are really upstate. I was in Bedford, so that doesn't really count. I'm sorry. I was in Westchester.
That's okay. Did you want to add something to that, Kristy?
Oh, I was going to say that I do believe that our pets can also be our soulmates. That we have those special connections with them, and that you can often, and I've had people say, I feel like this is an old man. I feel like this is, a young female, spirit, that's in my dog, that's in my cat. And so I think that that's where sometimes people are like, well, of course, this was probably, a little house on the prairie type of a female that lived. And that's one of the reasons why we name them, human names. Yeah. We feel like we need to humanize them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking tonight with Lauren Cahn, culture writer, and Kristy Robinett, psychic medium. Kristy, I know your website is your name, KristyRobinett.com. Lauren, I want to change the subject, but before we do, where can people find most of your work in the easiest way?
The easiest way to find my work is to Google my name, or maybe Google my name with the word writer next to it, because that's going to pull up all my work. It's going to pull up indexes of my work, like all my work for Reader's Digest, all my work for Health Digest, all my work for Eat This, Not That. So I also write about food, believe it or not.
Yeah, some of the articles you'd written about food, I'm reading some of these headlines. I'm thinking, oh boy, if I read this, I'm going to have to change my diet. I don't think I can do this tonight.
Oh, no, you don't know. I don't change my diet at all based on what I write. So no one who reads my stuff will either, I'm sure.
Well, then I'll feel guilty about it. That's almost as bad. Kristy, you offer private consultations and stuff on your website in addition to access to your books?
I do, yeah. I'm on pretty much anywhere everybody, is on social media and such. But yes, everything is pretty clear cut on my website.
We've started talking about this topic already, but I want to revisit it, Lauren, because you wrote about it. I think the headline for the article, the name of the article was 10 Chilling Crimes Involving Ouija Boards.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Ouija boards have a bit of and Kristy hinted at this as well. In paranormal circles, you either love them or you're afraid of them. There's not a lot of middle ground with these. A lot of people say that they are portals to allow things into your world that you don't want in your world. Tell us a little bit about the article that you wrote, 10 Chilling Crimes Involving Ouija Boards.
I feel like the overarching theme there is that Ouija boards it's like it should be a professional tool and amateurs are using it. I don't know if there's anything, real about, I think it's made, Parker Brothers, it's made by a game company,
right.
Ouija board.
Right.
So it's like an imitation. It's like playing with a toy gun and pretending you're a cop. I don't know. It's like pretend. It's pretend. Mm-hmm. Unless you are a psychic, unless you really do have that spiritual inclination, in which case a Ouija board would be great, but maybe so would just putting your hand on a photograph. So would a crystal ball. I feel like a Ouija board is an external thing that Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people will say that it's just a tool, just like any other tool. It could be the same as tarot cards. It could be the same, as you said, as a crystal ball, or it could be the same as a spirit box. Any of these tools that paranormal investigators or people trying to talk to the other side might use. Kristy, what do you say about Ouija boards?
Yeah, I think it's an intention. If you're intending to conjure or communicate with whomever, well, you're probably going to get a low vibrational energy that's going to come through with that intention. I like to overprotect myself, even if I'm doing a paranormal investigation, and that is probably stemming just from my upbringing as well. But and issues that I've had, hitchhikers and such from the spirit world that has followed me home, or that I've helped other people because they've been followed home or had menacing issues happen from them. But I'm not a fan, but I also think it's intention. You can pick up a deck of tarot cards and still have a disability of, sensing or seeing or feeling or experiencing or getting a message because you might have protected yourself. So I guess if you don't want to mess with fire, then don't mess with fire. If you want to mess with fire, you're going to maybe get burned.
I think the difference between the Ouija board story and the psychics helping detectives story is just in the context. Most of my Ouija board stories are people using Ouija boards to lie and make up ways to fool people into.
It's more sinister.
Yeah, the one that I think of the most is, the woman who killed off her competition, using a Ouija board, like a crazy scheme. And most of the stories in the Ouija board article are that sort of story. But when detectives use psychics are there to do good, not to do harm. I just think it's a different context.
Sometimes.
Well, right. I'm talking about real psychics. I'm not talking about, the con
Here I
artists
am
out
sounding
there.
very cynical. Sometimes.
Lauren,
the real ones.
Lauren, I like in that article about Ouija boards that you wrote, you worked with Robert Murch, who's a good friend of mine, and probably the world's biggest Ouija board and expert and collector. He's got an incredible collection of Ouija boards.
He's amazing.
Yeah, and he brings it around to events that I do, and I'm always amazed at what he has and what he's found, and what a great guy. So I was excited to see that. But as far as a portal to demonic activity, is there any truth to that, Kristy?
I think it's, again, low vibrational. If you don't want somebody to break into your house, then you're probably going to lock your door at night or when you leave. It's the same thing with the spirit world. If you're going to allow yourself the opportunity to talk to just about anybody, and it depends on where you're at in your life as well. If you're in a low vibrational space, if you're going through a lot, if you've had a lot of grief, if you've lost your job, if there's, you're using alcohol, if you're using drugs, whatever in that low vibrational plane, that frequency, then you're playing with fire. So, could it be demonic? Sure. I think a lot of the cases that I've had paranormal, I've only had a handful that were really demonic out of thousands of other cases that I've been called on. So the percentage is super small, but it doesn't mean, try to find one. It's not hide and seek.
Right. Let's talk about, again, a topic that we've touched on a couple times already. You wrote about it, Lauren. I think I saw an article that said 13 mysteries actually solved by psychics, but I guess you had maybe an updated one that said 20 mysteries actually solved by psychics?
Exactly. I added a bunch more because they're always coming out of the woodwork.
What does an officer say, Kristy, to you when they want your help? How does that process work?
Depends on the officer. If they've been, asked by the family for my help, or if they are open. A lot of officers are empaths themselves, or they have their own psychic hunches, but they'll call it, the gut. I feel it in my gut.
Yeah.
A lot of times they will test me, and I'm okay with that. They will hand me cold cases that they don't have information on that isn't connected to the case, or they'll hand me solved cases to see what information I get on that as well. For the most part, I've had amazing law enforcement officers that I've worked with. I've had some also that are a little bit ego bruised because they don't want to use a tool, such as myself. And I get that as well. They spend tons of man hours working on these cases, and I come in and say, this is the person, and this is why, and this is where the body is, and this is it, and so it doesn't necessarily bode well sometimes.
I would say that despite the fact that the three of us and probably most of the people listening to the program would agree that this is an interesting and effective way to help solve a crime, you probably can't take a psychic's word to a judge and get an arrest warrant or something with that, right? I mean, I imagine it doesn't work that way.
No, I think there's only been one or two cases where that has been the case. Even one of the major cases that's been written about me, most of the cases that I work on, I sign confidentiality agreements that I will not mention the case, or I'll be very vague with the case, or I won't go to the media. And this actually was one of the cases that I think Reader's Digest picked up with, was the Ashley Holly case. Someone actually broke the news that I was searching for her body in the park with law and with family. And I still, to this day, I actually know who did it. I shouldn't say I don't know who did it, but I did not break. I didn't call media. But by the time we were done doing a search, media was at the entrance of the park. And that actually could have damaged the case. So for most of law enforcement cases, I try to stay very incognito, and I don't do this whole, oh, hey, look at me, I'm working on this case, because one, it could be damaging. You don't know who's going to try to get information from you, or I've had the killer outside my door when my kids were very young, and I thought we were all going to be murdered.
Oh, geez.
I've had some very scary, frightening experiences, so I don't like to play cop. I love that we have them, and they are experienced with how they do things and what they do.
I mean, I can give you the legal perspective on that.
Please do, yeah.
In order to get a search warrant, you have to have probable cause.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there's any case law out there that says that a psychic's opinion, no matter how esteemed that psychic is, I don't think there's any case law that says that that's going to give you probable cause for a search warrant. But what it can do is it can lead you to find things, which is, I believe, what happened in the Ashley case. Ashley Howe. Isn't that what happened? You guys went searching?
Correct. Yeah.
You knew where to search. You didn't know, you couldn't tell them everything, but you get hints, so you can use those hints to develop your probable cause.
Yeah, so you can actually, Kristy, you can actually help the investigators. You can kind of point them in the right direction, and then it's up to them to find whatever burden of proof they need to be able to take it to the next step.
Exactly, and that's what you hope, that you're a little bit of giving them a shortcut, because you're giving them the information to point them to where they need to be looking instead of looking at all of the aspects that
you're saying, look over here. Hey, look over here.
Right. Has it ever been used against law enforcement in the sense that, say, and I'm just going to throw a hypothetical out there, that a defendant is in court and the defense attorney says these guys used a psychic to get this information. This is all hooey.
I haven't encountered that, but I have encountered. I was working on a case, and they were sure that this said person was responsible for a murder. And I was working with the prosecution, and I was like, I do not think that you have the right person. And they ended up turning me over to the defendant. And I helped actually get the person that they had in custody out of it and help them prove that that wasn't the person responsible for the crime.
So you were able to help exonerate somebody.
I was. And it was my moral compass. I'm like,
Sure,
I cannot let this. But they were like, well, he's a bad guy and he's probably done something bad in his life and we're just putting him away for something. But it wasn't for that crime. It drove me crazy. And, I worked with actually a bunch of different, the Innocent Acts agencies and such to help get him out of prison.
Wow. When you wrote the article, Lauren, or the articles, because you've written about it a couple times, were you surprised at how maybe not common, but certainly how many of these cases have been affected successfully by psychics?
I was at first surprised that there were. It doesn't seem to me like there's that many that people are willing to talk about. So I guess what I noticed more than anything else was what I mentioned before, which is that there must be psychics involved with a lot of cases, but no one hears about it. It just wouldn't do well. It wouldn't do well with the public. So they have to use they use the psychic because they know that it could help. But they're not going to tell the public, and we're talking to psychics, and that's going to solve this crime.
Do you think that's changed at all? And I'll start with you, Kristy. There's been a shift in attitude about some of these paranormal discussions since reality TV has exploded with these paranormal shows. I was involved with one for many, many years, so I've seen it firsthand. These discussions about ghosts and spirits went from a backroom discussion to a dining room table discussion. And, so attitudes have changed a little bit. Do you think the attitude is changing in law enforcement a little bit?
A little bit. I think it also has kind of put a lot of people out there who think that being a psychic detective is a cool thing and that they might get a reality show out of it. So they contact people,
right.
They contact the front, page, murder mystery that's there, and they contact law enforcement, and law enforcement has an obligation to pursue every tip that they're given.
Right.
And sometimes it does make them go on a wild goose chase. So for some degree, yes, and for some not, because they're like, oh boy. I mean, we saw it in Paranormal Investigation as well. Everyone thought, okay, I'm going to get a ghost hunter show.
That's right.
Because I ghost hunt. I'm going to have a camera crew following me.
Yep.
So yes and no.
What do you think, Lauren? What do you think about that? Has it changed? Has the attitude changed?
Not so much. It's more. It does have more entertainment value. I think. Look, let me just say that I think that spiritualism. I know it goes back a long, long way. And when I said that I write about the royals, one of my favorite things to write about was Queen Victoria and her interest in the paranormal and wanting to contact Prince Albert after his death. I mean, this is people have been trying to conjure up spirits for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. So I think my guess is that people wish that they could have proof.
Yeah. Yeah, we've often talked about that as well, and we talk about the American Civil War being a real catalyst for people yearning to reach out to loved ones that they've lost. And in many cases, these people went off to fight the war, and, in some cases, their family members never knew what even happened to them. So it was a time of, and since it was Americans fighting Americans, the amount of American grief, it touched everybody, and therefore it really added fuel to the spiritualism movement and this effort to reach out to the other side, particularly with things like spirit photography, all that stuff that was happening. It's pretty interesting story in itself. Kristy, what's your advice for somebody who might either be involved directly with or have, a friend or something where there's, a missing person kind of case? Do you recommend they reach out to a psychic if they're not getting any what they would consider to be progress from the law enforcement community? I know some of these, cases exist.
Sure. So my personal protocol is I will only work with police officers. So I ask that the family contact the lead detective and either give get permission from the lead detective that they can talk to me or that I talk to the department, but I always ask for either an email from the detective, some sort of evidence that they're giving me approval, because sometimes the agencies have more information that they're giving to the families, and they're waiting for something else to be uncovered, and I definitely don't want to jeopardize a case. We see so many of the shows that are 48 hours, and everything is solved. And the realistic perspective is it's years that some of these, sometimes they're, like you said, they're all unsolved. There's so many of them. So I work with missing persons cases. I work with different agencies, and I work free of charge because I feel that's a whole other story I won't bore you with. I had an attempted kidnapping when I was 8 years old.
Oh, geez.
And I feel like because of my situation and because I was saved from that it was actually a serial killer, from that person.
Wow.
That I know, sorry to drop that bomb on you.
Wow.
But I feel like it's my gift to give back. So I've been accused of, taking money, and because a lot of people, they'll give their life savings, to get information. And that's where I get that cynical side of it, where it's like, no, it's about helping. And yes, we have to pay our bills too. However, in situations involving a missing person or an unsolved, mystery like that, I think it's if we've got that gift and we're able to give back, that's what we'll do. So absolutely, I have helped on cases, but I always personally, I don't know what everybody else is that do what I do, what their rules and protocols are, but I always ask that I have the police officers' blessing, if you will, even if they don't believe in me. I just want them to be okay with me giving information, because what that family is going to do, right, is they're either going to be a vigilante and they're going to go after the person or the people or
right.
the information that I give them, and I don't want that. I don't want them to get harmed. Or they're going to give it to the law enforcement officers, and I don't know if it's going to be the telephone game where it's misconstrued with what I said. So I'd rather go right to the source, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I want to ask you about one other thing that you mentioned, and I've got no argument with what you said. In fact, I think it's an important point to make. There are some charlatans in this line of work, just as there are in any line of work. Sadly, often these charlatans in this particular line of work can play with some real emotions that you might not find in another business or another place. How do you recommend people discern if they're looking to somebody for help, whether it's for a crime or if it's just some kind of personal consultation or trying to reach a loved one on the other side? How do you recommend they determine whether they're working with somebody that they can trust?
I think references, word of mouth is so, everything is on the internet, right? And everyone's got an opinion and everybody yelps everything.
Yeah.
But, I think that it really honestly is, looking at reputation. I've had very smart people who have, just gone to like Chicago or New York and, decided to stop at a palm, get their palm read, and they were given information that preyed on their desperations. And I've had them call me and say, well, this person says, I'll never find love if I don't give them, $6,000
right.
or $20,000 or what. And they're like VPs of corporations. And they're like, should I do this? And I'm like, no, what? Wake up. There's some people that are really good at preying on that, so if it sounds like it's crazy, it's crazy. Absolutely, it's crazy.
Yeah, we've heard those horror stories of people, and then, it starts out a couple $100 and turns into, and a lot of times they'll say, I see an attachment on you, and we've got to get rid of this evil attachment, whatever it happens to be. Kristy, you can be reached through your website, right? KristyRobinett.com. And if people want to book private consultations or connect with you, that's the way they do it?
Correct, yeah. I'm very blessed. I have a great clientele. I book probably about 8 to 10 months out.
Oh, wow. That's great.
So I've had people say, so you don't work much, right? I'm like, no, I work like 6 days. That's what poor Lauren, when she's like, can you do this radio show? I'm like, I actually have clients in the morning. I don't think I can. I'm going to sound like I'm 104. I got to go to bed.
I was very persistent.
But KristyRobinett.com is where you can reach me, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I'm very accessible.
Well, thank you for being here. I have another question for Lauren. Kristy, if you want to go because you have clients, I'll let you go because it is late. But I do appreciate your time, and I do appreciate you being here.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Kristy.
Thanks, Kristy.
I just want to ask you one more question, then I'll let you go too as well, Lauren. One of the things I did notice, and you actually just mentioned it, which I think is kind of funny because I have it. It's my last question for you on my list here. Is you write a lot about the royals, about the English royal family. What is the appeal? Because I've never caught it. I didn't watch Princess Diana get married. I didn't watch any of that stuff. But there are people that really, really are fascinated by this. What do you think the appeal is?
I think there's two ways of looking at it. And the way that most people look at it, like the people who love Princess Diana and the Queen, and that's about just the excitement of riches and monarchy and fairy tale stuff. Mm-hmm. For me, I like the historical stuff. I'm fascinated by Queen Victoria. That's my thing. Queen Victoria is kind of my obsession. And I basically, everything that I study about the royal family somehow dovetails off of Queen Victoria, who she was related to, who her predecessors were. And I do think that it makes sense, since Victorianism, the Victorian age is very connected to spiritualism. So I see why it would appeal to me.
We've seen a lot of what I would guess would be considered turmoil in the royal family recently. What do you make of all of that? And I wouldn't really be able to tell you the details. I just know that somebody left the royal family. And what happened? Yeah, what happened there? And what's that all about?
Well, this is what happened with Meghan Markle. She's an actress. Mm-hmm. And she married Prince Harry, who's Princess Diana's younger son. Mm-hmm. So he's an heir. He's a successor to the throne, but he's not. He's not going to be king. A lot of people would have to die for him to be king. Meghan is a woman who's of mixed race. She's not what the British people tend to be used to. Mm-hmm. She's also quite a force of personality, from my understanding. So I just don't think it was a good combination. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if they're going to come back. I don't know if she and Prince Harry are living in LA now.
Didn't they just sign a Netflix deal? Didn't they sign like a Netflix development deal or something?
I heard that.
Something like that.
I guess it's true. I mean, I feel like they're dancing very close to celebrity, mm-hmm. But I don't think that's a problem. It may be a problem for the royal family, because they like their privacy. They like to have control over how things are portrayed. Right. And I think with Harry and Meghan, they're out of the fold, so they're kind of wild cards. But it's really no different from when the Duke of Windsor left, when he left, he stopped being king, and he went and married an American divorcee. Right. And I think they had the same issues with him. They couldn't control him anymore.
Right.
So there was tension.
Right. It's all fascinating stuff. Again, I really appreciate you joining us tonight, Lauren. It was a great conversation. We went all over the place, but we had a lot of fun doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to keep an eye on your work. And if something else comes up that looks like we might want to talk about it, I'd love to have you back on the program.
Oh, me too. This was great fun. Thank you.
And let folks once again know where they can find your work.
Well, they really should just Google me, Lauren Cahn, Cahn, and all my work will pop up.
Perfect.
I know. I don't have a website because all my media outlets, have an archive of my work.
Right,
so.
right. Makes sense. Well, again, thanks for being here. Lauren, have a happy new year, and look forward to having you back at some point.
Thanks. Great to meet you. Great talking.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.